We tend to view the human body as a leaky vessel, constantly betraying our deepest secrets. We want to believe that if we look closely enough, a twitching eye or a shifted foot will tell us exactly what someone is thinking. This chart represents the bedrock of that belief, the famous claim by psychologist Albert Mehrabian that communication is 55% facial expression, 38% tone of voice, and a mere 7% the actual words we say. It's the origin of the idea that 93% of communication is nonverbal. But applying that formula to everyday conversation is a total misinterpretation of the science. Mehrabian's original 1967 study was extremely narrow, designed only to test how we interpret feelings when someone's words and tone directly contradict each other. In a technical lecture or a business negotiation, the verbal content is what actually carries the meaning. When researchers analyzed decades of data on deception, they found that human accuracy in spotting a liar averages out to 54%. Statistically, you are performing barely better than a coin toss. We fail because we treat the brain like a physical dictionary. We assume every twitch maps one-to-one with an internal state. But the brain is actually an emotional prediction engine, constantly adapting its signals based on the immediate environment. Searching for a universal code of behavior creates a false sense of certainty. When we rely on these rigid rules, we often project our own expectations onto others, making it harder to see what is actually happening in the interaction. Take crossed arms, often cited as a sign of defensiveness. In reality, wrapping your arms around your torso can be a form of proprioceptive comfort. It's a biological way to lower cortisol levels and provide a sense of security in an anxious setting. Then there is the myth of shifty eyes. We assume liars avert their gaze, but recalling complex, truthful facts requires significant cognitive effort. Looking away from a conversation partner removes visual distractions, allowing the brain to focus on accessing long-term memory. Practiced liars are often aware of these stereotypes. Because their stories are rehearsed, they have the mental bandwidth to maintain intense, prolonged eye contact, or even exhibit duping delight, a fleeting flash of excitement that comes from successfully deceiving someone. This disconnect leads to the Othello Error, named after the Shakespearean character who misread his wife's distress as proof of infidelity. It occurs when a suspicious observer interprets the physical stress of an innocent person as a sign of guilt. An innocent person facing a false accusation experiences high arousal stress. Their heart rate climbs, they might tremble or sweat, and their gaze may wander. To an observer looking for tells, the physical profile of an anxious, innocent person becomes indistinguishable from a guilty one afraid of being caught. By focusing on isolated physical signals, we risk creating false positives, prosecuting innocent anxiety while completely missing the cues of a practiced liar. Our internal motivations are just as prone to misinterpretation. Procrastination is a prime example. We often see it as a lack of effort, but it is actually emotional avoidance. We put off tasks not because we are lazy, but because the work forces us to confront feelings we don't want to deal with. This same drive for comfort explains why people stay in draining jobs or stagnant relationships. The brain is wired to prefer predictable pain over unknown happiness. Familiar suffering feels safer than the uncertainty of a better situation. We assume our beliefs drive our actions, but the Benjamin Franklin effect shows it can work the other way around. When you perform a favor for an enemy, you experience cognitive dissonance, a friction between your action and your dislike. To resolve this, your brain rewires your perspective, deciding you must actually like them, because otherwise helping wouldn't make sense. Between procrastination and these shifting beliefs, it becomes clear that our actions are often guided by a need for internal consistency. We aren't always acting on logic. We are often just trying to resolve emotional discomfort. Standardized body language training assumes every human being operates on the exact same physical baseline. It presumes that a single gesture means the same thing, regardless of who is performing it. This assumption overlooks the reality of neurodivergence. What psychologists call the double empathy problem occurs when a neurotypical observer misinterprets a flat affect or gaze aversion, which are natural sensory processing norms for many, as a sign of disinterest or deception. Cultural variance also complicates these rules. In many East Asian cultures, a smile is a tool used to mask distress or embarrassment, rather than express joy. Applying a standard Western interpretation to that expression can turn a sign of social deference into a perceived lack of remorse. We struggle to read others, but we are convinced others are constantly reading us. This is the spotlight effect. In a famous experiment, students were forced to wear an embarrassing Barry Manilow t-shirt into a crowded room. They estimated that half the room noticed the shirt, but in reality, only about 25% of observers ever noticed. While we feel like our every mistake is under a microscope, most people are trapped in their own egocentric biases too, preoccupied with their own actions to notice our perceived flaws. Psychological literacy requires moving past a checklist of physical tells. It involves the cognitive flexibility to evaluate a person based on their unique internal context, rather than a universal rulebook.